Becoming enlightened in jail? What? Welcome to the Joyous Expansion Podcast. I'm your host, Brett Dupree, scouring the globe to bring you stories of courage, passion, and resilience. If I could sum up this podcast into one word, I would use empathy. Now let's get inspired. Welcome to the Joyous Expansion Podcast. I am your host, Brett Dupree, here once again to rock your world of inspiration, motivation, and all that jazz. Yes, I was gone last week, but mostly because life just got too busy. Too many things were happening at the same time. The week before, I spent time with my girlfriend, took a Monday off, and it was sweet. She's awesome. And then the weekend after, I went to a Toastmaster conference. You know, what's funny is the Toastmaster conference is a great deal. It was only $185 for a day and a half plus a bonus session, and the information there was magical. Everybody who presented was outstanding, and then there were 4 contests. The International Speech Contest. I'm in District 2, which is Western Washington, from the Canadian border down to Kent, and it was sweet. The International Speech Contest was outstanding. All the speakers were so inspiring and great, just such great performances. And then there was an evaluation contest, and where people evaluate. If you listened to my podcast last year, I think I was actually in the evaluation contest last year. It was super fun. And then there was a humorous speech contest, and those speeches were funny, as well as a table topics contest, which people were asked a question, and the question was something along the line of, if not now, then when? Tell us your life story, which was an interesting question. The food was nice. The speaker was Darren LaCroix. He is a motivational speaker who started off as a comedian. He actually joined Toastmasters because his mentor comedian talked about getting stage time, and Toastmasters is a place where every week you can get stage time. Even if you just take up a role, you are still speaking in front of everybody. I'm president of the Lightworker Toastmasters, and every week I get to go on stage and speak. It's a way for me to improve constantly. I love Toastmasters, which is why I'm mostly going to talk about the conference this week. Take a little break from my 10 commandments of the Church of Awesome, which is great. I love the Church of Awesome. I'm still waiting for my friend Michael Vadava to finish my theme song for the Church of Awesome podcast. I'm excited to get that started and really working on living an awesome life and taking things to the next level, trying to go beyond mediocrity. And one way to go beyond mediocrity is to go to the Toastmaster conference. I highly suggest going if you've never been to a Toastmaster conference or been to a Toastmasters. Toastmasters is an organization where you work on public speaking and leadership, and honestly, I've gained so much out of Toastmasters in the last 9 years. Yes, I know some people, when they talk to me about Toastmasters, they don't see a lot of, think of it as amateur hour, but I honestly have gotten a lot out of it, and I've seen people grow, and just being a part of that organization is magical. So one of the speakers there was Darren LaCroix. He was the 2001 World Champion of Public Speaking. That's what Toastmasters has. They have a yearly contest where everybody starts with a club, then area, then division, then district, then regionals, which changed this year to be recorded and sent, and the top 10 go to the world stage to have a chance to become a world champion. And this guy was the world champion. And the funny thing is, I believe it was 5 years ago is when last year, pretty much you become a world champion. You can make a career just going to Toastmaster conferences. I don't know how much you get paid. Probably nothing, but then you just make products and people buy it because you're a world champion. But the best part about it is I remember watching him 5 years ago and being very inspired, and watching him today, he's better. He's a better speaker. So it's awesome seeing somebody who is great become greater. He's still somebody who's working on his craft. That is very inspiring, always becoming. So if you want to become a better public speaker, the ways to do it, according to Darren LaCroix, is the first, most, and 3 important 3 rules is stage time. Every day you're not on stage, you're not improving. So get on stage every chance you can get. Plus, that's a way to increase your confidence. Another way to improve is to record yourself. Record yourself and watch it. I can tell you it's not fun. I'm not a big fan of recording myself and watching it, but I do it, and it does help. Actually, I think listening to this podcast, and when I edit it, listening to me again, is another way for me to improve and to find somebody who's where you want to be and talk to them. He talks about talk to the headliner, not the opening act. Because if you talk to the opening act, you'll get opening act suggestions. But when you talk to a headliner, he'll give you headliner suggestions. Unless you find an opening act who has talked to a headliner and is working. So I guess basically surround yourself with people who are where you want to be, or at least moving towards it at top speed. Yeah, I can say I was very inspired by the Toastmaster conference. A little tired afterwards, a little bit, but honestly, it was great. It was great. I love surrounding myself with amazing people, talking to amazing people. And that's one thing I like about Toastmasters is we are a group of people who want to improve our lives. And that's what we're getting together for, is getting together to improve our lives. And we're there to support each other when it comes to improving our lives, which in my opinion is very important. So if you are in an area that has a Toastmaster club, I highly suggest you go to one. It is important to surround yourself with people who are working towards improving themselves. And they might not all be headliners there, but there are people who are earnest and improving themselves. Plus, I also think it's good to be in a group of people who also have different headliners, because there's so much advice out there. And learning from multiple angles can help you find your angle. And that's one thing when I started Lightworker Toastmasters. One of my hopes is they don't just use Toastmasters to improve, that they hire their own coaches or do their own thing and bring those skills to us on how for us to improve. I think that is important. But that's enough about Toastmasters. This week I talked to a Joe Beck, a very interesting conversation. I really enjoyed this interview. I am surprised by how many people I have talked to who were drug addicts in a past life. By past life, I mean a few years ago. I think 3 of the last 5 I've talked to have been in that situation. But people who've gone down that road and bounced back up are inspiring, at least to me. And was very inspired by his interview. Joe Beck is the founder of Divine Spark. He is a YouTuber, personal blogger, and content creator. After facing his own personal struggles and bottoms, Mr. Beck is now devoted to a life of healing and transformation. His victory over drug and alcohol addiction, along with severe anxiety and depression, is truly inspiring, and I know you're going to enjoy this conversation. And now, here's my interview with Joe Beck. Hello, Joe Beck, and welcome to my podcast.
Hello, Brett. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. You are the creator of Divine Spark?
Correct. That is me.
How'd you go about creating something like that?
I knew I wanted to create something to sort of give back and just live my passion and to share my song and do my dance. It was something that kind of came to me in meditation, that word Divine Spark, and it's something that means a lot to me, and I can dive into it deeper if you'd like. But basically right now it's an LLC, and we have a Facebook page and a YouTube and an Instagram, and so we're constantly evolving. It's been a fun, wild ride to be getting into it.
That is so cool. One thing I've learned by talking to people such as yourself, healers, people like me, is that we have what you call like origin stories, something that gets us to wanting to heal someone. So can you tell us about your struggles?
Absolutely. My struggle started pretty young. I guess from an early age, I was never really comfortable in my own skin. Quickly, I found out that drugs and alcohol were something that sort of were a patch job for that. They made me feel like I could express myself and be myself. And so started to use drugs and alcohol as a way to feel I could be free. And they worked for a while until, they no longer work. And so went down a pretty dark path of rehabs and different counselings and institutions and ultimately ended up in jail. And that is where I hit my very low bottom. I was imprisoned on May 23rd of 2014, and it was actually 3 weeks after my first-born son came into the world. So imagine, having a child, and then 3 weeks later, you're arrested and waking up in a jail cell with little memory of what happened. And so, once I came to and kind of sobered up in that jail cell, I was in a very dark space. I was facing burglary charges. I was feeling the shame and guilt of failing again and of leaving my son without a father. And it was a very, very dark space in my life where I didn't have much of a will to live and was actively thinking about ways to end my life and sort of just barely hanging on by a thread. I received a book in jail from my mother called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And I was so broken. And it's interesting. It's like once you get to a space at times of such brokenness and defeatedness, that the hope, is that one surrenders and they become open to other possibilities. And that was the case with me. I was so broken and defeated that for the first time I was open to something that I wouldn't have been open to in the past. And so I read the words in that book by Eckhart Tolle with such an openness, such an open mind, that they hit me at a very soul level. And for the first time, I was able to step back away from my thoughts. I was able to get extremely present and to silence my mind. And I had, there's many different words for it. I had sort of an enlightened moment, or a holy instant, you could say, while I was in jail, where I was so present and free. And I had actually never felt that before when I was outside of jail. So it was kind of the beginning of my healing journey, just to discover this aspect of me, that there is this awareness and that I am not my thoughts. And that really gave me a glimmer of hope, and it had me tap into something that, like I said, really started my journey.
Something that stood out to me, you said you weren't comfortable in your own skin. Could you elaborate on that?
Absolutely, yeah. At a young age, I was always moving around to different schools. My parents had me at a young age, and they had different jobs. And so bounced around South Carolina, New Jersey, PA, different parts of PA throughout my life, and always going to different schools and always being the new kid. Got picked on a lot, lots of rejection. And so because of those external things that happened, I started to believe that there was something wrong with me, that I was different, that I was not good enough. And it made me very uncomfortable in my own skin, to the point where I constantly had this judge in my mind, this sort of filter where I was extremely quiet, was afraid to say anything for fear that, I would be rejected or that it would be stupid. And so I was very much observant and introverted. Yeah, because of that, I was shutting down my life, basically shutting down my light, just extremely anxious, depressed, and uncomfortable in my own skin, just afraid to be me. And so kind of became the shell of a person, and then cover it up with drugs and alcohol, and it's a recipe for disaster.
What was your drug of choice?
My drug of choice was opiates. Ultimately ended in heroin. The longest that I abused the drug was definitely prescription pills. I went down a pretty crazy road with, I'd wake up and I'd use Adderall, which is a stimulant to really get me moving. And then to come down, I'd use an opiate. And then to fall asleep, I'd use like a benzo, like a Xanax or an Ambien or something like that. And so that's where things got really messy. But of course, when you start to use heroin and injecting, you could lose your life at any time. And it's a really sad epidemic of how many people are losing the battle to the heroin addiction.
Oh, yeah, that's very true. We are having an epidemic right now in the United States.
Yeah, no doubt. Sad.
Did this something that started hardcore at first, or did it start almost innocently enough and then ramp up?
Definitely started as an innocent thing. It's kind of funny because I was so uncomfortable in my skin, one of the only things that was on my mind was to fit in. In sixth grade, I was on a mission to fit in and to be in with any kind of crowd, basically. But if I could be in with the popular kids, that would be, ideal, because that would make me feel accepted and worthy and whatnot. And so I started to because like I said, I was very observant. And so I started to see what these popular kids were doing. And in sixth grade, the rebellious things you do, or you flick like little tape balls into girls' hair, or you push other kids, or you slap people with like your ruler. And so I started to do some of these things, and I started to kind of catch the attention of some of the more popular kids. And next thing I know, they were kind of hassling me and almost initiating me and messing with me. And then after taking it for so long, they sort of welcomed me into their group. And so they were the first ones to drink alcohol and smoke weed in seventh grade. And then, it was definitely started off as innocent and nothing too intense. And then, by ninth grade, I was experimenting with pills and had kind of taken it much farther than these original group of friends ever did.
So did those do a good job of masking your anxiety?
Absolutely. I mean, I would say it depends on the drug. I never enjoyed cocaine or Adderall or those stimulants because they sort of sped me up. And I would say there was definitely times where I would almost send myself into a panic attack from taking drugs like that. So it's kind of a mystery and just shows the insanity that I even would still use those, knowing the risk that it could make that anxiety worse. But absolutely, opiates and benzos, they were like almost an immediate cure or quick fix, you should say, for the anxiety.
So, what was the worst part about taking the opioids?
Phew, the worst part was basically that it's almost like a toxic relationship. You give your life up to them, and so it became my entire focus was to get high and to have that feeling. So I gave up the chance at going to college. I gave up the chance of living in my parents' home. I literally took it that far. I'm stealing from my loved ones, not talking to friends, lying to girlfriends. Basically, that opiate became my love, and I would hurt people and do horrible things just to keep that love in my life because I was terrified to give it up and to actually feel without that drug. So yeah, I mean, that's definitely the worst part. Is it starts off like little things like stealing $20 from your grandparents or skipping school, and then it really as you stay on that road, it evolves to some pretty horrific things.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a good trade-off for less anxiety at all.
No, I mean, yeah, I guess it depends on the anxiety. I mean, I think that there's people that experience such debilitating anxiety and depression and they don't see another way. And you take that pill. And once that disappears, that can be very tempting to want to continue to do that. I mean, to feel like you can go to work or school and just be yourself. If that's what it does for you, it can be really a tempting, demon to mess with, because that is what it did for me. I could go to school and I could be myself. I spoke freely. I became the class clown. I got girlfriends. I was able to go to work and to, again, be myself and talk with the customers and things like that. And so while it does to a sane person, while it sounds like a crazy trade-off to say, you're going to go to jail over this, it was literally at the same time the one thing that made me feel like I could be free and to actually to silence that judge that is so heavy in my mind. So it's interesting. It's a powerful disease, addiction.
Yeah, someone who used to have a very, very judgmental judge in his head, I could see how that would seem like a good thing at the time.
Right.
Just have a moment of silence of not worrying that everyone hates me. Would have been awesome.
Exactly.
How did all this end up with you going to jail? What's the story behind that?
At the time was actually trying to get sober, believe it or not. So I was 23, trying to get sober. I was living in a sober home with other sober men, and I had just gotten a job for a swimming pool company. I was installing swimming pools and doing maintenance and things like that. And it was around early April, just around the time when it was starting to get warm, springtime. And so basically all I did was go to work. I would come home and go to a meeting and hang out with the guys in the house and eat food and screw around and go to sleep and kind of repeat. Eventually I got to the point where I stopped doing those meetings. I stopped talking to the guys in the house so much. Work got very exhausting. I started to make friends at work, and these friends at work were doing things like steroids and going to the gym constantly, and started to fall into that whole pattern and that whole sort of illusion of thinking that it's going to make you feel better. And once those meetings fell off and sobriety, didn't really become my priority, quickly started to get more miserable and didn't catch it. And so one day we were at a job installing or doing some maintenance on a swimming pool. The lady's home that we were at, she actually was absent from. So she was allowing us to be working, in her backyard, and nobody was home. My partner who I was there with was doing a part of the job that I couldn't do, basically told me to go, wait in the van. He would be up when he was done. And I decided that I was going to do some snooping around. So I snooped on into the house that we were doing the work at. The door was open, and I started to go through the medicine cabinet, and I found some prescription pills that I knew would make me feel better. And so I found a drug called Ativan, which is a form of a benzodiazepine. And I took the whole bottle with me. I took a couple of pills, and justification of the rationalization that I was just going to take a couple. And, I'm going to be able to control it this time. And I'll just take a couple from this bottle, and I'll take some during the week, and then that'll be it. I'll stop. I can't go down that rabbit hole again. And so it's just kind of a treat for all the hard work that I've done as soon as I take a couple, it's like I become a different person. And I truly do believe that I have that addictive mentality where I took a couple, some kind of switch flips in me, and then an hour goes by and I take a couple more. And all of a sudden those things that I'd be telling myself, like, I'm not going to take this many, or I'm not going to do this or that, they so quickly fall to the wayside once I have that drug in me. And ended up taking far more than I planned, ended up blacking out at work. Don't exactly know what happened, but supposedly we went to the next job to do more repairs on a swimming pool. And the story or the police report says that I actually broke into this person's home. The next job, I snuck into their window. A neighbor or something like that saw me. I have no idea what I was doing in the home. I assume that I was probably looking for more pills or drugs or alcohol. I'm not really sure, but ultimately when I came to and woke up, I was in jail. I was in prison. And so I was in jail with burglary charges, felony burglary charges. And I was looking at doing state time in prison and with no memory of what the hell I even did. So it was pretty scary and intense stuff.
That is intense. I couldn't imagine waking up like that.
Right. Yeah, man.
So at that point, your mom gave you the book Power of Now.
Yes.
How did that change things? Exactly.
Yep. So my mother sent me that book. I believe that it was something that was recommended to her from a counselor that I had in a previous rehab. I'm not so sure, why she picked that book. I like to think that it was maybe an intuitive thought or something that was in her heart, or who knows why she picked that book. But I truly believe that it was the perfect book for me. And so sometimes I recommend that book to everyone I meet, but I do truly believe that there are different ways to say the same thing. And so while that book was a language that I understood and that hit me deeply, it might be a different book for someone else. And so anyways, this book by Eckhart Tolle, like I touched on a little bit before, it's sort of all in the title. It talks about the power of now. It can be so easy to become identified with our minds and with each and every thought we have. And with that, it can be so easy to get lost in the past and the future. So oftentimes we relive the past over and over again in our minds. For example, if you and I end this podcast and I'm thinking, man, did I say the right thing? Did I say something stupid? I wonder how I sounded. And I could relive that throughout my whole day and totally miss the moment because I'm reliving something that happened in the past. Or I could be doing this podcast right now and I could be thinking about what I'm going to have for dinner tonight and how I have to pick up the kids and get them to bed on time and do this and that. And could be, again, totally out of this moment and not focused on what I'm doing. And so the idea being is that we can bring in awareness, that we all have this awareness in us to catch ourselves when our minds go and do that habitual thinking of going to the past or going to the future or having the thought that I'm unworthy, that there's actually this greater awareness that we can sort of get behind those thoughts and catch them. And it's something that we can begin to cultivate and to practice to bring in that awareness more often and to actually retrain our brains. And so that was what that book was about. It actually helped me to see that awareness that I had never seen before. I had always been so identified thinking I am my mind, I am these thoughts, I am in the past or I am in the future. I believed that I was my mind, and I never had that awareness that I'm speaking of come into play. And so that book helped me to tap into that, and it was definitely a life changer.
So what's the first practice you took out of that book?
Definitely the first practice I would say is a body scan. And so in the attempt to get people to feel that awareness, or he calls it beingness, he would do something like a body scan. And so he would say to close your eyes and to just kind of imagine feeling your hands and to feel the aliveness in your hands and how connected you are to your hands, something so simple that we don't think about often because we're so up in our heads. And so to just really close your eyes and to feel the power in your hands, that there's living cells throughout our whole body. And then he would go and kind of work you through. Now feel the energy and the aliveness and the beingness in your feet. And he would run you through this whole body scan, which is a common practice. And afterwards, you feel that sense of presence, of aliveness that doesn't typically come if you're just stuck up in your head all the time.
Sounds like a good practice.
Yeah.
How did that lead you to founding Divine Spark?
Yeah, so it was a long road. So Divine Spark's about a year old, but ultimately it's the same thing. It's just, again, different language. Like I'm calling it the awareness or the aliveness or the beingness. And so I think that aliveness is something that all people feel. that sort of spark within you. It's something that people feel, but it's typically in rare moments. And so I describe it as, people usually feel that when they stare up at a starry sky. They can just kind of sense this wonder and awe and mystery, and they feel alive. Or, for people that have children, when their little kids come running at them at the end of a work day or a school day and they say, Daddy or Mommy, it's that sense of that like feeling like alive, like, this is it. Or, hiking and getting to the top of the hike, or finishing a race and crossing that finish line. There's these moments where we feel tapped in, we feel alive, we feel present, but usually they're very rare and fleeting moments. And so the idea behind Divine Spark is that we all have this spark. We all have this piece of divinity in us, and it comes in those moments that I described, but it also is something that we can begin to tap into more often. And it can happen through the practice that I described, like the body scan, through meditation, through finding practices that work for you. For me, I really enjoy going into the sauna or working out and being very present, not listening to a podcast or music, but just being very focused on what I'm doing. There's different sound healing, and there's so many different practices that you can get into. Each person is unique, but basically the whole idea is to find a practice to help you tap into that spark that we all have, but that we sort of more often than not lose touch with somewhere along the way.
Wow. Your business is only a year old?
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So starting a business can be struggling. So how do you utilize your Divine Spark to deal with the fear of rejection and the fear of being seen within your business, especially sharing with something so vulnerable?
Great question. It's continuing the work and realizing that there's always more growth to be done. And so I would say there was a point where Divine Spark really wasn't doing much. Was putting out a video a week, putting out some content, but there wasn't a whole lot happening behind it. But I was in a space enough where I knew I wanted to start it. And so it's great to start something. That's a huge first step. That is the first step. But just because you start something doesn't mean that it's going to continue to grow or turn into anything. And so I really had to continue to grow. So one thing that was a catalyst for me was to go through an emotional intelligence workshop. It was a weekend workshop that I did. We did lots of exercises. We did things like looking into somebody's eyes and seeing the true depths of a person. Something that we don't do anymore is look in people's eyes. And so doing exercises like that, it was like a whole weekend of different experiential exercises that really helped me to break free and to grow and to feel expanded. And so after I went through that, I really amped up our website, and I started making more videos and started creating online courses. And partner who was a part of Divine Spark with me, Michelle, she went through the course as well, and she began making more jewelry and is constantly making bracelets now and writing a blog. And we can go through different things. We can read more books, we can do workshops, and we can continue to grow. And as we grow as people, that should also come into aspects of our relationships or our jobs, or in this case, Divine Spark. And so a key for me is to continue to grow on my personal self. And when it seems like the business is kind of stunted, it's usually a good space for me to pause and to read for a bit, or to check out a course, or to reach out to somebody or something like that.
One of my favorite things you said was that it's fun to create something. That tends to be my favorite part. The creation.
Yeah.
Follow through is not my specialty. Or at least that's the part I need to work on the most.
Got it. Yeah, I love that. And I mean, that just kind of sparked something in my mind, even about the process and enjoying the process and not being so focused on the end results. I've heard so many authors say that the best part of writing the book is not when it's released, or not when it makes the bestsellers list, or not when it starts to sell. It's when they're in the active process of, you said, creating it. It's when they're in that space. There's something very amazing about it, but it can be easy to kind of become obsessed with the end result, or like you said, the follow through. So I love that, man. It's definitely important to stay focused on the creation. That's the beauty of it.
So what do you like most about starting your own business, Divine Spark?
I'd say the thing that I like most is I talked about how earlier in my childhood and my early teens and even early 20s, I was shut down. I was afraid to be myself and was so friggin' quiet and judgmental and just fearful. And Divine Spark is like the total opposite of that. It's like people that I went to grade school or high school with that see the content that I put out, they can't believe that it's me, because I was so quiet. And I put out some stuff that's like can be far out there, that can be new agey or religious or spiritual, or it can be like just a sort of an out there idea. I am quick to release it. I am quick today to, like I said, put out my content, to share my song and to do my dance, because do not want to get to the end of my life and to look back and say, I didn't go for it. I didn't take my shot because I was scared. And so that feels really freaking good to have created something that I know is serving people, and that I know that in order for it to be created, I got to break through those fears of being rejected and being hurt. And so it feels very authentic and genuine and vulnerable. And I would say that's the best part. And then, of course, obviously some nice side effects are that, I'm able to make my own schedule and to really live my passion and to do what I love, which I think is probably for most people that start their own business, or at least I would hope, that's a beautiful part of it.
One question that comes to my mind is, you said that you're someone with an addictive personality. And one thing I've discovered in this spiritual work is that there are very aspects of it where you can really go deep into that rabbit hole and get there, especially, let's say, workshop. I think the after workshop high is one of the best feelings that I ever gotten. How do you see where I'm trying to go?
I do. And I think that is something that I'm still trying to figure out. And I can even elaborate on that some more. And I think it's such a common thing. I mean, so basically, like an example for my life, which I think you're saying is that, so one of my struggles that I still face is that I have not an easy time, but easier times for me are during the week. I go to work and I have my set schedule and I create my content, or I do my interviews, or I do my writing, and I do whatever I'm going to create. And I'm in a connected space. I take breaks during my workday. I do walking meditation. I do all this and then I have it very routined out where it's usually a pretty good flow. And then I usually go to the gym, and then I pick up my kids, and my fiance comes home and we make dinner and we have our routine. And the weekdays are typically pretty smooth for me. But then when the weekends come and it's time for me to really connect with my family and be present and to not actually go and do something or like create something, I have a very challenging time with that. I have this mind that's sort of wired, like you were saying, to think I'm doing something wrong. I can't just be sitting here building Legos with my 5-year-old. Something needs to be created. Something needs to be shared. Something needs to be achieved. And so there's this underlying discontentment that constantly comes up for me, and that is a huge work in progress. I've come a long way. I'm constantly, like I just said, catching it with my awareness. So I'm very aware of it, and it's a lot better. And I have figured out ways to sort of hack it, but it is something that's constantly comes up for me. And I think it's also reflective of our society. It's sort of this hustle and grind, this sort of masculine thing that we want to do. We want to be in that space of creation and achievement. And when we get so into that, it can be hard to just sit there and build Legos with your kid, or sit there and have a meal without doing something or watching a YouTube video. I think that's what came up for me when you said that. I hope I was sort of on target with what you were mentioning, but that is something that's an ongoing challenge for me and can certainly relate to.
No, I like that answer a lot. Thank you very much. For my listeners, is that I like to ask people what they want to be asked. And one of the questions that stood out to me that I wanted to get before we end is, what do you believe is the purpose of life?
Question. Heavy duty. So I believe the purpose of life is to love, is to evolve, is to learn lessons, and to ultimately remember who we are. So I think it can be very easy to come here and to believe that we are these limited bodies, or to believe we are these thoughts, to believe we're just here for a short time and then we die. So I believe that we are here to remember who we truly are, and to love and to evolve.
Nice. So we're getting to the end of our interview, and one thing I like to ask my interviewees is to give a 1 minute of motivation. You can think of this as if you have a time machine and you went back to your 8-year-old self, but you only have a minute to convey the information that you'd want to give to set your 8-year-old self up to a life of joy, or condense your entire life's purpose into a minute.
I love it. So yes, I would encourage everyone to embrace all aspects of themselves, even those aspects that you might not like very much. And I'll give you an analogy that goes nicely with this idea. So I want you to imagine that you're a castle, and in your castle, you have hundreds and hundreds of rooms, and each one of those rooms represents a different aspect of yourself. So you might have a room that's labeled anger or sadness, or a goofball room. And so one day you invite someone into your castle and into the room that's labeled goofball, and they see that goofy side of you and they judge you, they call you a loser, you're weird, lame, and so So you decide to close that door to the room in your castle in order to protect yourself. And then you go through life shutting more and more doors in an attempt to sort of mold to society and to avoid that fear of rejection and being hurt. And eventually you believe that you are just a tiny house and you forget who you really are. So the reminder on my end is to remind you guys to embrace all aspects of yourselves, because that's the way to living a wholesome and fulfilled life.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on my podcast. I really enjoyed your struggle. And for the most part, related to the anxiety aspect of it, is that something I struggled with in my youth. And listening to how you went through your anxieties, to getting into hard drugs, to finally turning your life around through utilizing the power of now awareness and meditation is very inspiring. And the fact that you are now taking that and sharing it with the world with your divine spark is very commendable, and thank you for your service to this world.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Brett. Keep on doing your thing. It's been great to chat with you, and I hope to do it again soon.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
And there you have it, folks. What a wonderful interview by the Joe Beck, someone who's new to this whole personal guru space, but man, what a story. Somebody who found meditation at one of his lowest moments and was able to build out of it and discover a true path, a new path, a path where he no longer needs opiates and drugs to get high. He can get high on life, like that old saying. I really liked his interview. The amount of vulnerability people have in sharing their stories with me is very inspiring. I love the fact that people are willing to come on here and tell us about the struggles that they've gone through. Regular people just like you and me. I mean, I suffered from extreme anxiety in high school. I never used drugs because, for the most part, I was too afraid to even want to be accepted into the cool crowd. So he had to step up on me there. But at the same time, to be wooed into that and to go beyond where he was, I find that very inspiring. I love the fact that he has a great outlook on life to help and serve others. And I really think that is an important part of life. If we serve each other and truly serve each other, we all can survive. This is not about everyone being rich. Who cares about being rich? We have enough abundance in this world. We have enough technology to feed, clothe, house, and provide a decent living to every human being on this planet, while even saving the planet. Listening to people like Joe Beck, we realize that if he can do it, we can do it too. And there's extreme value in serving others. In serving others, that's how we save ourselves. That's the important part about it. When you give and give and give, it's like the end of Scrooged. I just love that end. You just want to give. And the more you give, the more you receive, because that is what's special about life. And so I thank Joe Beck for sharing his wonderful story he gave to us. So I ask you, my dear listener, what was your biggest takeaway? Joe Beck's story. Are you going to be doing something different in your life? For instance, maybe you can follow Joe Beck, because you can follow Joe Beck on Instagram at Walking Joe Beck and at Facebook at Joe Beck Inspiration. You can check out his weekly videos on YouTube at Divine Spark. If you are interested in life coaching, transformational online courses, inspirational videos, crystal jewelry, or intuitive readings, please check out Divine Spark's website, which is www.divine-spark.com. Be sure to subscribe to their email list to receive updates and inspiring weekly emails. That is it for episode 26 of the Joyous Expansion podcast. Isn't that exciting? 26 episodes. I am your host, Brett Dupree, the champion of authentic joy, master of transformation. That one's not real. Champion of catalyst of transformation, and cult leader of the Church of Awesome. I still haven't decided what name I'm going to use. If you want more information about me or you have a question, you can send an email to BRE2TsDUPR2Es at joyousexpansion.com. If you want to listen to more episodes, go to pod.joyousexpansion.com. I have a free gift for you there. I would love for you to break out of your prison of fear, just like I have. Man, the fact that I have 26 episodes of a podcast shows that I have at least broken out some prison of fear. Also, like and subscribe on whatever you're listening to this on. Add a review if you love me. If you like me, I would truly appreciate that. Every review helps. So once again, thank you for listening to the Joyous Expansion podcast. I once again remind you to be love, to be joy, to be awesome. Now play my jingle.
JoyousExpansion.com. JoyousExpansion.com. Come and say hello to Brett Dupree. He is an inspirational life coach. Good for you and good for me. He turned my life from grey to blue. I'm sure he'll do the same for you. Get in touch and you'll see your life will change dramatically. JoyousExpansion.com. JoyousExpansion.com. Yeah.